just in case anybody wants the recordings. I am, they're on, we finally figured it out. Faye and I figured out what the little glitch was. I have them unlisted, so they're not actually on my YouTube page. They would only be for this group, not to be shared, just in case you want to go back and review anything. So I was saying I'm really excited for tonight because I feel like we have to get through the first 2 weeks of kind of understanding who we are and the role we play in our own story and the role of those internal stories, those stories we tell ourselves before we can actually get to, so what are we going to do about all of this? You know, what's sort of the, oh, Miss Rena, I love that photo. That's a really cool profile shot. What are we going to do with this information and what happens next? Kind of where have we been, where are we now, and what happens next? And active authorship, which is what you guys know I talk about, taking responsibility for your own career, your own life, your own happiness, being the active author of your own success, relates to all three of those areas. The past story, how we speak of ourselves and where we've been. And some of you I know are most interested in that. How do I tell my story? How do I tell my story effectively so I could interview well? Or how do I just speak of this, you know, my crazy career journey? The present story, what do we do with the opportunities in front of us so we don't just find ourselves lying in wait 6 months from now, a year from now, kind of in the same position, just doing what we always do because it's easier. And then the future story, which is kind of up for grabs. So all of that depends on plot. And that is what we are going to focus on today. I'm going to move my chat over and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up the program for today. So here we are, week 3. I'm super excited. I really look forward to this, you guys, every week. And I hope you're getting a lot out of it. And just a reminder as well, I mentioned it, but for the people who joined in a little late, I am available to you during this process as your cheerleader and your collaborator and your realist. Kelly got a big dose of my realist vibe the other day. She had a terrific idea and I was immediately like, how are we going to do that? And as your Yoda or your mentor, however you want to call it. So don't hesitate in between sessions to reach out to me if you find you're stumbling over something or just want to review something or have any extra need for individual attention. I am here for you. Okay. So plot. Every story has to have plot. Your story has plot. I don't care how boring you think your life is. I get up, I go to work, I do the same thing every day. I come home, I walk the dog, and that's all that I do. There are still things that are happening. There is action in this story. There are actions we can take, and there are plot points we can create. And then even when we make our best efforts to create and act upon those plot points, life's going to throw those plot twists at us, those things we didn't see coming, and how we react to those, that creates new plot points. So this works for the past story when we talk about what happened, which was some of your pre-work assessment, your pre-assignments was talking about something that had happened. I gave you two story options, something that had happened in the past. And then the present story, what's happening now? There's always something happening, even if you say, well, not much is happening, you know, there's always something happening. And then the future story, what might happen? Each of these depends upon some type of action and our role as being active authors as part of that action. Meaning that we are not waiting for something to happen. We are not waiting for someone to define our past. We're going to own that story. We are not waiting for someone to make our present day choices. We're going to make those choices, take those actions, and that we are going to stay in charge in actively authoring that future chapter. Maybe it doesn't mean we do it every day. I woke up the other day and I was just like, nothing was flowing. My plans for the day, the writing I was going to do, the work I was going to do, I just wasn't feeling it. But it was an active choice to not do it. So does that make sense to everybody? It's different from sort of being like, I can't do anything about it because I'm just stuck. It was a decision of, I am not going to force this right now. but I will have a plan for getting back to it. That is still active authorship. You are making a choice. As I mentioned, when we talked about that narrative point of view, and it can see how this all shows up, that narrative point of view gives us past evidence, which impacts present decisions. And that in turn impacts the future, creates the future story, because the future is based on our present actions. So this applies to plot points as well. We have a past story that gives us evidence. I was successful when I did this. I was not successful when I did this, that we use to interpret or use for our present actions, and that creates the future story. So that's how it all kind of plays together, and why we need to be able to look at the past and look for a sense of value or learning in those stories. So one of the questions in that pre-assessment was about, if you're looking back at a situation where you felt a conflict or a challenge, something that didn't go well, we're not changing the facts of what happened. We are reframing the story of what it means to us so that you can make it situational or growth opportunity, as opposed to a statement about who you are that impacts your next chapter. So let's start now with where we are in the present. Some of you, if you've taken a workshop with me before, you might remember this exercise. It is one of my favorites because everybody gets super creative, or at least they think they're not creative, and then they do get creative. If you had to give a title to the current chapter of your life, where you are right now, whatever this plot is that's going on with you, what would you call it? And in my workshops, I usually play 60 seconds of music while people come up with something. Why don't we open up the chat button? And there's no right or wrong answers here. This is your story. You can call it anything you want, and go ahead and put the title of just the current chapter, where you are right now. I'm going to call mine, "What the Heck is Going On? A Story Waiting to Be Solved." There you go. There's mine. What's the title of your current chapter? Bobby, the calm before the storm. I want to know what the storm's coming. Kelly, I love that. Not only because I love alliteration, but because I love the words re-energize, renew, reinvent. Faye, do I know where I'm going to? Sung to the tune of Do You Know Where You're Going To? I love that song. Marina, living in the moment. Yes, you are. Rich,
Sway with my way.
Caught between two limbs. Okay, curious to know. Miss Reen, sway with my way. I love that.
That's really good.
Brings out the sway my way.
Both are good.
Both are good, yes. She did a little copy edit there. Katie and Kristen, you got something for us? I can see Katie's feeling the pressure. I can see it. Need time to breathe. What do I do now? You do need time to breathe. Kristen, take the next 10 seconds. Katie, you're going to want that back, as I'm about to do great things and those past stories will miss me. Will they miss you? Talk to me about that. What will they miss?
I feel like I sound a little angry in that title.
Oh, sorry. I'll turn that off.
I think that I'm not going to dwell on those anymore, or things like being let go from my job. Like, oh, I mean, this isn't the goal for me to, get back at them and have them miss me, but like, let myself be a little more empowered by having the opportunity and going forward. Like, they're going to, want that chance back to have me as their employee.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Like, take a look at me now kind of thing. Okay. I love that. And I think that's really good. I was going to ask, like, you're not going to miss those stories.
No, I'm excited for the rewrite.
Yeah. And here's the thing that I think is really cool about that is, we're in constant evolution. You are not the same person that you were back then.
Mm.
But I also think those opportunities, and I was just coaching another woman today who was let go from her job. Well, no, she left. She chose to leave her job earlier this year because she had been given a really terrible new boss. And after a year, she just couldn't make it work. They were probably going to manage her out anyway. She chose to leave on her own terms. She heard this week that boss got let go. And so she had this regret of like, but if only I hadn't crossed paths with her, then maybe I'd still be there and she'd be gone, or if I could have hung on. But here's the thing, those moments, and we'll talk about this, are pivot points in your story, that are set to launch you in a certain way. So going back and trying to regain that, and what would I do differently if I had the hindsight, all that stuff it's the wrong direction. And it's something we're going to talk about today. But as we are in a constant state of evolution, you are not the same person that you were, regardless of the work even you do in this class. You are not the same person that you were when you went through that part of your story. You are someone, we're constantly reinventing. So I like this exercise, and I like for people to think about what's going on for you. What are the plot points right now in your story that are making you title it that way? Particularly for anyone who maybe isn't in a great chapter. Like Marina, you're in you just stay there. You're living in the moment. It sounds kind of awesome. You're not in a rush to turn the page. Like, I think that's a great place to be. But for someone like, Rich, who's caught between two limbs, or Kristen, who doesn't even have a chance to breathe, or Faye, who's not quite sure of the direction, I think it's important to focus on, why did you choose that title? What are the plot points that are currently going on for you that caused you to choose that as the title of your current chapter? Because those plot points are the things that we are going to be acting on, so that when we get to the next chapter, which we will do by the end of tonight's session, and we come up with a title for the next chapter, it's not the same thing. Except for Marina, because she's in a really good chapter, so she can stay there. Okay?
But I still have those moments where I think about things like you just mentioned. What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? But no, you're right.
Yeah, no, and that's good. And of course, we're all going to have our moments. When you're in a good, someone said to me once about are we constantly always like turning the page? And my feeling is, it's not like you have to if you're in a really shitty chapter, let's get you out of there. Let's turn that page faster. But if you're kind of good, you stay there.
Yeah.
So give a little thought, everybody, as to what's going on for you right now that had you title your current chapter that way. What are those plot points? And then we can look at what are the things that we need to actively work on to change the story. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay.
Typing out my plot points.
Okay, good. Yeah, and so we'll be doing more of this tonight. So you guys saw this in the pre-assessment. This is where I love bringing what I know about storytelling to our own personal lives, because it wasn't until I started creating my own workshops and I thought about, what do I know about storytelling, and how can the average person, not someone who puts stories on TV or tells them in print, but like, how can the average person use this? And I pulled up this is your basic narrative structure for a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And most stories start with this exposition. This is like your little bit of backstory, kind of the setup. Now, I will tell you, most people, when they interview, or you say to someone like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, tell me about yourself, they spend way too long on the exposition. That's really just you really only need to give a sentence or two, and then you get to kind of where we are right now. But what's interesting about this story structure, and I tell people, you guys already know what I'm going to point out here, but when I tell audiences about it, there is an essential key story element. You have to have this element to have a good story. But in our own lives, we don't like it. And it's conflict. Isn't it amazing when you think about it? You have never seen a movie, read a book, watched a show, or heard someone's story that didn't involve conflict, if it's a good story. I mean, conflict is what makes us care. It's what actually puts a story in motion. And yet in our own lives, we avoid conflict at all costs. We hate conflict. It feels icky. So it might sound strange to say, but the next time you find yourself in a state of conflict, and we'll talk about what that means, because it can mean any number of things, rather than getting that feeling of like, oh God, I hate this feeling, what if you just thought to yourself, I'm at the start of a really great story? Because this is what puts the story in motion. Now, if conflict is too strong of a word, and for some people it is, because they think conflict is like two people butting heads, which it could be in your story, but a state of conflict is really anything that makes you feel conflicted or challenged. It is not the norm. It is not this backstory. Something has happened to change it. So it could be you were let go from a job and now you find yourself unemployed. It could be you have a job, but it's no longer satisfying you the way it once did. That is a state of conflict. It could be you are so busy that you don't have the time to do what's most important to you. These are all states of conflict. If it helps you to think of it as a challenge or something else, you can change the word. But the interesting thing is, you can't even get the story started without that conflict. And then I'm going to talk to you about why most people get stuck here and they don't even go through this whole story arc. We all want to get here to the resolution. How does the story end? And what kind of an ending do we want for our story? We want a happily ever after, right? We want to know this is a good story. It's going to work out for us. But we can't even get there until we work through the conflict. So in the assessment work I had you do, I had you look at some past conflicts or challenges. What was the story there and how did that work out? And also consider what are some present ones and how might those work out? And that will figure into your plot as well. The most important thing to know or to remember is that the stories will continue once we move out of that state of conflict. The story doesn't end here. The story ends here. On the resolution, but you got to get there. So I really like this quote. It was attributed to Orson Welles. I'm not totally sure it was his, but we'll say it was. If you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, on where you stop your story. So if you stop it in that state of conflict because it's hard and everything sucks, that's not a happy ending. You just have to work through the conflict and get to the other side. And as you saw, it's an uphill climb. It's an uphill climb, that rising action, to get to that climax. So we'll take a closer look at that. But another way to think about conflict is a story element that nobody likes and that is required to even have the story, right? So I call it one of the main unlikelies. I actually do a whole program just on the unlikelies, which are story elements we don't like and don't believe are likely to help us. This I would call all the crap that shows up, right? That is like just part of being human. And I think we are uncomfortable with it because we assume it's not supposed to be there. It's like, you know, it's getting in the way of a happy life, when actually it leads us to a really good story. So I say we need to embrace the unlikelies. You don't have to like them, but you have to understand the role they play. So what are some of the unlikelies? Here's just a couple. Things like disappointment, dissatisfaction, envy, regret. Katie, this can turn to rumination if we don't work through it. Uncertainty. Faye, we can get stuck in uncertainty if we don't work through it. These are all states of conflict. So when I talk about conflict, it doesn't have to be, you know, my neighbor and I are butting heads over his ugly fence that he put up, or, you know, my boss and I don't get along. It doesn't actually have to be a conflict with a person. It certainly can be. It can be an internal conflict. It can be that feeling of, I'm just unhappy with myself, you know, or I'm really envious of someone else's life, probably because I'm unhappy with myself. or I can't stop thinking about a decision I made that didn't work out for me, or I regret not doing this earlier, or I don't know what to do. These are all states of conflict. So these are some of the unlikelies. Can anybody think of any others that they want to bring up, or any other states of conflict that I haven't mentioned here?
Unhappiness.
Unhappiness, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I think of frustration.
Mm-hmm. And what's causing, I want to ask both you, Nisreen, and I'll start with you. Do you know what's causing the frustration?
I think for me, uncertainty is definitely a part of it. Disappointment is a part of it. Like, I think when I start getting frustrated are the times where there's conflict around, there's uncertainty and confusion, or not aligning with reality, basically. And I get overwhelmed. And then that self-centered or narcissistic voice in my head is like, why am I the only one seeing this? Starts coming up, and that's how the story goes, I guess.
I'm curious, is the frustration with a particular person or situation, or are you frustrated with yourself and your reaction to a situation?
That's a good question. A lot of time when I'm unsure, where like when that feeling starts bubbling up and I start, take the time to look at it, I think it starts with the situation. And then as I zero in, I start getting, and listening to all these voices in my head, I start probably like being unhappy with my part of the situation. And then as I ground myself and start looking at the reality and what things are actually happening, and aligning with that, I start seeing the different parts of the puzzle and where the different conflicts are coming from. And that leads to a resolution. If all parties agree to resolve the issue, right? Now, if it's a project that I'm personally working on, I would start understanding that maybe I'm not following the process correctly, or I skipped a few steps because I was too eager to get somewhere else, to get closer to the end. And I have to track back and figure it out. But when there are other people involved, it's like wheels on a car. Not one wheel can throw you off completely if it's it's bad, but all the wheels need to work correctly in order for you to move forward. And that's where I start getting frustrated, is like one person is not willing to move or change or listen to the others, and kind of throws us off balance.
Yeah, and it's funny because you originally used the word alignment when things aren't in alignment, and then the example you give about the car and all the wheels. But it sounds to me like there's an initial frustration. There's an immediate frustration with the situation not in alignment, not the way you want it to go. And then you kind of take it apart and decipher it and work towards a resolution. So like almost like there's an immediate response, and then there's a secondary response when you have time to give more consideration to it.
Yeah, I one of the things that I've learned along the way are those generic terms of like sad and happy. They're really masking something a lot deeper. And when you become more precise and name the elements correctly, then you have a better way of solving the problem. So when I have that overwhelming sense of frustration, I know that there's a problem, or there's a sense of a problem approaching, that I have to ground myself and look at the environment and the element, like everything around me, and align with what's true and not just the voices in my head.
Yeah, no, and I love that, and I think that's actually a huge lesson for all of you, just exactly how Nisreen described it, and also to help your team along, and then to give yourself a little bit of forgiveness for being human. It is okay to be someone who gets frustrated when things
Yeah.
don't go according to plan, you know? And so if you have sort of that judgmental voice in your head, for first, you're judging the situation because you're frustrated that it didn't go according to plan, but then it sounds like you're frustrated or angry with yourself or disappointed in yourself for being frustrated. So now we're doing a second level of judgment. And I think as someone who has to then bring the team on board so you can get them on alignment, actually owning that part of it without judgment is important, is really important. Faye, I was gonna ask you, you said unhappiness. Can you be more specific about what that means or the circumstances around that?
So I seem to feel, I just feel like I have this, remember Pigpen and how there would be all the garbage and it would be, you know, constant, and I kind of feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a person who really needs order around me. I really need my ducks in a row. And there are so many uncertain elements in the world right now, from the really global about the pandemic
Yeah.
and, you know, other things related to that, and then more internal about that relationship I mentioned might be going away. Actually, it probably is going away. I just haven't accepted it. And not knowing what I'm going to do for a job. And also, you know, there's this really it's the chicken and the egg, right? So I'm so demotivated and I'm so not wanting to be on a schedule and to apply this sort of self-discipline for myself that I have been very successful in the past.
Yeah.
But I can't seem to get myself started, because if I could get myself started, then I would. So my unhappiness, it just feels overwhelming.
Yeah. So, but a lot of it sounds like it's coming from the uncertainty of the situation and the feeling of you can't get out of it. And when you said Pigpen, but I almost picture like this like little whirlwind where you're sort of trapped in the middle of it. Yeah. And we need to get you sort of like pushing through some of that. And I hope that some of the coaching techniques tonight are things that you can work on. But I do think, I do love Nisreen's suggestion on just when we have a general term of unhappiness or frustration, to be able to look at what is it specifically. And so I think for you, it is coming back to that uncertainty and that feeling of needing that inner positivity to work through it so that we don't stay stuck in that state of conflict. So I do want you to think though about whatever your conflict is, whether it's the unhappiness, the uncertainty, frustration, sense of overwhelm, sense of regret, that these aren't bad things. I'm not saying you have to like them,
right?
But they are available to you as plot points, as pivot points in your story. And if any of you follow Oprah, like I know some people think of these as clues. Now, we might feel dissatisfied about something and we can just push it away because it's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable. Or we can take it as a clue that this isn't working for us. So if I'm dissatisfied with something, and if I can acknowledge that and then do the work to get back to a state of satisfaction, I've changed the story. And then I can stay in that state of satisfaction for as long as I want until I am no longer satisfied there. You know, I can look at why I have envy for someone else and decide what it is about their story that has meaning to me and work to identify that and implement those things in my life. My envy for that person then becomes a positive force in my own story. I can look at my past situation that I regret having made this choice, I never went and got the MBA because the time was never right. And I can look at that with regret, or I can decide, what do I want to learn from that regret and make a decision about now? And that regret becomes a good thing in my story. So again, I want you just to think about the unlikelies. And I bring back this quote because we had this the other day about thinking about things differently. So that when these things come up, the frustrations and the unhappiness and the overwhelm and I don't have time to breathe. Okay, so what does this mean? Think about it differently. It is a clue for you. And then if this is helpful, remember those two questions we were asking of our narrator. The first was, so what?
Like that.
And then the second was, okay, so now what? So what? And now what? So what? I didn't go back and get, and then, I didn't get my MBA years ago. So what? Okay, I don't have it. Now what? Do I want to get it now? No, I kind of don't, So we can use those questions as just, just to stop and think about the situation. Kristen, you've had a crazy day at work. Okay, so what? So this is how it is right now. Now what? You can go back and do it all again tomorrow because it'll be there. You can change some of your circumstances, or you can change your coping methods for how you deal with your circumstances. You can look to unload one thing off your plate, or you can choose to think about it differently. Like there's a number of different ways that we can tackle that. Now what? That is up to you. Nobody else is in charge of the story. I know it may feel overwhelming when we don't feel like we're in control, but that's why we need to think about things differently. Everything, all of these unlikelies, these are opportunities. Most of us though, and I speak from experience, will make the same mistakes again and again and again. And I did that today. I'll tell you my quick story, and then I'm going to see if I can share the video with you that I wanted to share. Someone dropped off cookies at my house, which was was doing like a nice thing for me. She's like, yeah, I dropped off cookies. And I was like, oh my God, we do not need cookies in this house. It was 10:30 in the morning. And she's like, everybody loves cookies. I'm like, I really do not need any cookies right now. But I'm like, you know what? It was nicer to do that. I will give them to my kids. Okay, so my kids each had one cookie, and guess who ate the other 3 or 4, but they were really big. Okay, I cannot have cookies in the house, you guys. I just can't. Like, it's the same bad situation for me every single time. I need to make a different decision because I know what's going to happen if I have the cookies in the house. So what? I ate the cookies. I don't feel really good right now. Now what? Now I need to really acknowledge that I can't just have the cookies in the house because I will make that mistake every single time. So that's just a little example. There are certainly bigger ones out there, but it's sort of recognizing the ways in which we cause our own challenges. Okay. I'm going to call up the video now. I'm going to start playing this. I'm going to leave your screens up so I can see you. Let me know if you can hear it, because if not, I'll go to my plan B. And if you still can't hear it, then I'll go to my plan C. I want you to hear the video of, I pull from all types of storytelling for my sessions. Kelly, you might have seen this one before. And this is a poem that I really like as it relates to the plot points of our lives. And rather than just read you the poem, which I might wind up having to do if you can't hear it, I found an old video on YouTube of Dr. Wayne Dyer reciting the poem. He was one of the founders of like modern day positive psychology. He's no longer with us, but he was very influential in the field. He really liked this poem. I really like this poem. I think you will really like this poem if you aren't already familiar with it. Let me turn up the volume. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. No?
No.
All right. I wonder why that is. Okay, hold on. We're going to try something. We're going to do plan B. I'm going to wind up reading you guys this poem. I know it. Plan B.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Okay, plan B is going to be, I'm going to try to pull it up on YouTube.
I was going to say, just find it as a source and then share your screen.
See, this is what I need a technical manager. You mean so it's embedded in my PowerPoint and then you can't hear it?
It might just be a solution to tonight's problem, but it could be that.
Oh, wait, hold on. Share computer sound. Let me try this again.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that you have to go to YouTube. You just have to make sure that you're doing it from Zoom the right way.
Let's see. I'm going to try this again. Oops, hold on.
It's embedded in your PowerPoint. We should be able to hear the audio.
Yeah. I have all these technical people on the thing and I can't. I need you people to come. Okay. I kind of want to wait for Faye to be back. Give her a second.
Well, let's test it out.
Okay. Okay. Listen up.
There was a friend of mine. Her name was Paul.
Yes. You guys are awesome. Now I know how to do this. Can you just like follow me around for all my presentations? And I'm like, I don't understand which button to press. All right. Can we just give Faye just a second to come back?
As we wait for Faye, there's always something in our technical space where we're demoing new technology, and every time without fail, when you're demoing the things that people are more interested in, it's not going to work.
It was just, that was
So
I'd never seen
it's
that button
not.
before. Honestly, you guys, I learn so much every day because the real story is I kind of have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like learning on the job. So I appreciate that. Now I learned one new thing today. Faye, we figured out the audio. Nisreen and Kristen and
Yay.
Marina all jumped in to help me figure out the audio. Okay, so I'm going to play this for you now.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Portia Nelson. Portia passed away a few years back. She lived up in Seattle. And she was at a seminar, and they asked her to, and they ask everyone, to write on a 5x7 sheet of paper or card the 5 chapters of their life. They only wanted to give them 5x7 cards because they didn't want them to get too wordy. And Portia Nelson sat down and wrote these words about the 5 chapters of her life. And I thought I would share them here with you. They're so beautiful. She said, chapter 1 of my life. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. And it takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. And it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my own fault. And I get out immediately. Chapter 4 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5 of my life. I walk down another street. Isn't that great? Portia Nelson.
I love that.
I walk down another street.
So Faye, you knew that. Who else had heard that Portia Nelson poem before? Anybody else?
Oh, okay.
Was it new to you guys? When I stumbled on that, I just thought, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Then I did a little research, and I learned that Portia Nelson actually wrote that poem it's about addiction. It's about addiction, which when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. But the reason I love it so much is that it speaks to everybody. So I've played this in my What's Your Story workshop to any number of audiences, and everybody loves it. Some people have heard it before, but they usually think about it in a different way. And most people who haven't heard of it, they love it because it can mean so many different things. Some people think it's about personal relationships. Some think it's about just our inner fallibilities. So whatever it means to you, I would ask you, what is the hole in the sidewalk that you keep falling into, even when you know it's there? So it could be you can't keep the cookies in the house. It could be how you respond to a situation. It could be this inner judgment that no matter how successful you are still constantly feeling like it's not enough. That is a hole in the sidewalk. Whatever it is, can you identify it? Do you see it there? And when will you choose to walk around it or down a different street entirely? Anybody have an immediate reaction to that as to what that story might mean for you? Or what your holes Some people have streets lined with potholes. What one of those holes might be: frustration, disappointment, unhappiness. Why are you jumping in that hole even when you know it's there?
Mine is
Go ahead. Faye.
somebody else talk. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Faye.
Mine is so self-evident, and I mean, I know what the hole is.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to sleep early and waking up early, because where do I have to be? What do I have to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just being very, and I've said the word discipline before, and I think part of it is I hate the word discipline.
Can we pick a different word?
Yeah, I know, but I've tried that.
Okay.
I don't know what.
What if your whole, and I'm just throwing this out here, and I know that because we've spent some time together, so I'm gonna throw this out, and you just sit with it for a bit. That's all I would ask is, what if the whole isn't discipline, and it's less about the going to bed on time and getting up on time so that you're not late for things? What if the whole is the self-sabotage because in some ways you almost fear being successful? Because
Yeah, I used to say that. I forgot. I used to say that.
You used to say that?
I did used to say that.
It might be worth thinking about it that way, about what are you avoiding? What are you choosing to do to avoid something else? And you and I can talk more about this offline.
Sure.
But I know that that's something that you've struggled with, is this idea of I need to be able to do this so that I can do this. And maybe we need to get at, why do we keep jumping in the hole to begin with? So that we don't have to crawl out of it every time. Nisreen, you were going to reply as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's made me think to reflect on another one that used to be one of my holes that I avoid and I walk down a different street now, is what's wrong with me. Was one of those. And that, to me, like, through my healing journey, it was a message that when you're in a narcissistic relationship, it gets you so confused and so out of touch with reality because of all of the gaslighting and the confusion and the blaming, and there's always something wrong with you. And so you start taking that inwards and internalizing it, and it becomes a statement that you say to yourself and becomes a part of our self-sabotage. So, I never say I walked away from that, because the moment you say that, you start going back to it. So I say that was one of my crucible moments.
I like that.
The one that I was gonna share is I find myself like I'm overcommitting because I care about my team's success. So I overcommit myself, whether in terms of time or skill, and I create that pothole for myself, basically because when I overcommit, I have a high sense of like doing what I promised to do, and because I can't, like I either stay long hours or work over the weekend or something like that, and I'm exhausted, so I can't make the right decisions, and it keeps that cycle. So right now, overcommitting for me on different levels in my life is one of those potholes.
Yeah, no, and I think in fact, I almost got a visual there of like, you almost like you're drilling the potholes in front of you. Like, I can do this, but now you've got all these things to, that can suck you into it. So
Yeah.
acknowledging that. And again, maybe thinking about, what is this feeling that you have to be overcommitted, that you have to do all this stuff in order to feel successful? Like, where can you scale back in a way, and why do you feel like you have to do all these things is probably what, you might want to take a look at. Rich, I'm curious for your take on this. Did you have any thoughts about the poem, or did it mean anything specific to you?
I actually went to school with Wayne Dyer, if that's any help.
Really?
Oh, really?
That old, but I think it's a great story, and I ask myself what holes I don't avoid, and I see holes that I often fall into. So it was very meaningful. I thought it was a great graphic description of what we all experience, and it made me go to a deeper level. So thank you.
Yeah. Kelly, what about you? Had you heard this one before?
Yes, I have, but it resonated differently this time with regards to the stories. So I understood when I watched it on PBS years ago, but there's always so much to take in when you're listening to someone like him. He's like Brene Brown, there's so much to process. So I think when I heard it this time, it resonated more with sort of forgiving myself for mistakes of the story repeated.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And then the permission to walk down a different street. So, it's funny how if you could hear it again and like it might mean something different down the road. But I do want everyone to think about what are the holes that present themselves to you, and what are the ones you fall in again and again, even when you know that they are there, and what is the opportunity to walk around them or down a different street entirely. So if anybody's interested, I'll send that out in written form. I did have it in case the audio didn't work. I do have it as a slide, and I can send that out to you if you would like to keep it and frame it and refer to it every so often. So another way to think about holes when we think about our story is this plot twists. Thinking about them as plot twists. So I ask these questions as you think about your own story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole, a specific thing, but who or what is standing in your way? Kristen, it might be your crazy busy schedule. Faye, it's the uncertainty. When or why do you veer off course? For some of this is situational. Nasreen, when someone on the team isn't aligning and all the wheels fall off the car because one can't go in a different direction. Are these challenges external or internal? Or maybe a combination of the two? And then of course that question, the how question, how can you overcome? So this will figure into a little bit of the homework we'll do, which would be more future focused. But if you can stay for a moment in this idea of your holes in the sidewalk or what's getting in your way, can you identify what the problem is, when it shows up, or why it takes you off course? How much of that is an external challenge or an internal challenge? Or maybe it's how you are internalizing the external challenge. Katie, Kristen, kind of not pointing fingers at you, but like things are going on that are challenging for you, but we do have a choice in those challenges about how we manage them and respond to them. And then of course, the how can you overcome? Keeping in mind that you always have the choice to do nothing, to sit and kind of wait until you decide what to do. But make that an active choice. If you're saying, I'm going to wait until this crazy time is over, at least acknowledge that you are waiting. No one else is going to jump in and solve it. You might get lucky. Maybe something will happen. But you just actively make that choice so that you don't feel stuck, so that you don't feel like you don't have you are choosing to not tackle the problem. You are choosing to not deal with it. You're going to wait it out. A better example, because I feel like I'm not describing that well, working with a woman who is quite unhappy at work, but doesn't feel ready to leave because the work is good enough. The work, she gets paid decently, doesn't feel like her life's work. Bobby's smiling because he probably feels some sort of camaraderie with this person I've been working with. She's just not ready to do anything. And she's sort of thinking if she hangs on a little longer, maybe she'll get a promotion. Maybe someone at work will pull her into an interesting project. She is giving away that active authorship to someone else in the story, but she is choosing to do it. She's like, right now I'm going to sit with this, even though I know it's not where my heart is, because there's enough good reasons for me to stay here. And I'm going to wait and see if something changes, so that she doesn't, at least she knows she's actively making that choice. So she's not going to look back a year from now and say, oh, I wasted a year. No, she is choosing to wait it out. Everybody got the difference there?
Yeah.
You can choose to do that. So how can you overcome? You can wait. You can decide just like kind of wait and see what happens. That option is always available to you, but own it.
Valerie, when you had the unlikelies before,
yeah,
the one that popped into my head was, and I wasn't quite sure it fit, was complacency.
Complacency is a good one.
And so you're saying it can be an active choice and a positive choice. I'm going to sit and wait this out. But it can also be a passive, I'm gonna put my head in the sand for a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, that's funny,
So
Bobby. When you first said that, I was about to say, oh gosh, is complacency even an unlikely? Is it a good thing? But I think if you are actively choosing it, yes, it can be an unlikely, because you know why? I think you've done the work to say, here's why I'm going to stay in this situation. Yeah. So you've basically taken the options you have at hand and decided that that's what you're going to do. So that is active authorship, and that is using an unlikely in a good way.
Right.
I'm going to add that. Complacency is a good one for me to add to my list. Thank you for bringing that up.
Valerie, you know what's interesting is that complacency is exactly the word. What popped into my head was sloth. That's what popped into my head. I was thinking slow, lazy, like what we're doing, but I couldn't find the right word. So maybe it's that one.
Yeah, but at the same time, Marina, and complacency is it's also a loaded word, but sloth's really a loaded word. I mean, what is that judgmental narrator? Who's telling you you are being sloth-like?
Me.
Okay.
Nobody but me.
And how helpful is that story?
It's not, but I can easily take myself off that.
Yes.
But that comes in once in a while.
I feel, and no, I do that too. And in fact, on the day when I told you I decided I wasn't going to do any work, and I binged a whole Netflix series, but I have to remind myself, like, you can, like, we're all adults here. You can choose to do that.
Right.
There is an impact to that. But I also think if the word that jumps in your head is like, gosh, I'm so lazy, I'm so sloth-like. Now you've got a layer of guilt on top of this. You should be enjoying yourself, except you've got a good side dish of guilt there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's not like I'm not doing anything. I mean, I have my day filled with things, but I think it's my own judgment that maybe it's just not important enough, when it is. It's absolutely important, and I know that. And everyone else is telling me to slow down. Why don't you just sit on the couch and binge watch something? And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should. So.
Well, it's also so different from the story you had been living for so many years.
Right. I think that's why it plays in my head.
So there's the discomfort of that too. And to be honest, I actually think now discomfort should go on the unlikely list of who likes to sit in discomfort. And I don't mean to say that being able to enjoy your day and do what you want is discomforting. It's the feeling of, I shouldn't be doing this, or shouldn't I be doing something more productive, or Rich's dilemma of, I feel like I need to do something more, with my life, and I've only got so much time left, and I've got to do all this stuff, this constant driving, that striver, which when you're judging yourself for not being productive enough, sitting in the discomfort maybe of the feeling of, what if I didn't have that expectation? What if I just allowed, if you're going to take the time to be lazy or sloth-like, you might as well at least enjoy it. Because I think if you're judging yourself the entire time you're doing it, you're going to need more of it. It's just not effective.
And I'm a good example of that.
Yeah. So you're berating yourself. I mean, maybe, Faye, some of the solution to the problem is giving yourself that downtime to not feel you need to be productive. And allowing that. It's almost like, when people say, when you're feeling bad about something, you're upset about something, or you're angry about something, give yourself that 30 minutes to just, cry about it or rail about it, whatever it is. But then hold yourself to, after that amount of time, you're gonna move on.
I almost feel like it's like your cookies.
Yeah, I got a problem with the cookies.
Because it's like, I could say that to myself, but then it's 5 days later.
Well, you know what I was going to say, Faye? It's almost like if I didn't eat the cookie and I ate
apple,
like a sugar-free, protein bar, because what I really wanted was the cookie, but then I couldn't satisfy myself with the other thing. I might have a little bit of a binge eating thing going on, which is kind of separate. But I'm saying, like, if you really want the Doritos, right, and that like having a bag of Doritos will make you happy, don't eat the low-fat, fake corn chip that isn't going to be as satisfying to you. Like, make the choice, have what you want. And then for me though, just, I have to learn to stop at one. How can I overcome? I cannot bring the cookies into the house. You know, like that to me is a simple solution. Okay, so for all of these conflicts or things, plot twists, hurdles, holes, whatever you want to call them, I like this quote because some of us are dealing with things that are bigger than others. Thomas Paine once said, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. This is what makes great stories. Kristen knows this. The number one story we put on the air is some sort of triumph over adversity. The bigger, the better for television. You know, we want those big stories. That's what makes us care. So if you are stuck in a conflict right now that is bigger than cookies, well, the more glorious your triumph when you come out the other side. But the reality is this is hard to do. It is hard to kind of move on from those situations, that those plot points that become habitual to us. So since the reality is very hard, I'm going to go to my favorite type of storytelling. Hey, you might, I don't know if you did this one with me before. Reality TV. Did we cover reality TV at the Yes Network presentation?
Maybe, I don't remember.
Okay, good. Well, then it'll be new.
Okay.
So I borrow from all types of storytelling. Let's talk a little bit about the plot for reality TV. I grabbed this photo just because I liked it. I'll probably use Real Housewives as the example. So reality TV is based on a very simple formula. I did some research here. There is a gentleman at NYU, professor, who teaches the formula for reality TV. It is based on the 4 C's. I will review it quickly. Character is the first C. Reality TV thrives on really outrageous characters. If you are a nice, polite person, you will never be cast on a reality TV show. You are not interesting to them. Character, obviously, in our own stories, we already covered that. We are the character in our own story. Then there is conflict. Reality TV thrives on conflict, so much so that we all know this. There's nothing real about reality TV. It is scripted reality. The producers will insert a conflict just to create action. So think back to my narrative arc, right? We had conflict at the start there. They don't get an episode unless there's a conflict. So the producers will create some sort of a conflict to get these women screaming at each other. In the face of that conflict, the characters have choices. So if I'm at the dinner and I'm upset because someone badmouthed me, I can choose to flip the table over, or I can choose to, you know, go back home and take a hot bath and read a good book. They are counting on, producers are counting on these outrageous characters that they have cast for their outrageousness in the face of that conflict to make which choice? The more outrageous choice, because it's a better story. And then in turn, because of their choice, they face a consequence. Consequences is the final C there. And the consequences then lead us into another storyline. No one likes the woman now. They think she's volatile. They don't want to invite her on the trip to the Bahamas. And now you have a new storyline. Okay, so that is the formula for reality TV. For any of you who've taken another workshop with me, you might have heard this. How do we apply that to our own lives? Well, I'm going to save 3 of these C's that play into our story, but I'm going to get rid of one. I'm going to get rid of the last one. I'm getting rid of consequences. Why am I getting rid of consequences? That's because I believe in the power of words, and I've never heard the word consequence used in anything but a negative sense, a pejorative word. I mean, we don't say the consequence of all her hard work is she got promoted, right? Or the consequence of her steadfast job search is she landed the job. We don't call it a consequence. We call it the outcome. So because that word is always considered to be negative, we're going to get rid of it. We're going to take 3 other words with us as we think about your reality. Look what I did here, guys. That's us. Your reality TV show, that's from our first meeting together. This is your reality. We are taking with us, you are the central character in your story. You are facing a conflict or a plot twist or a hole or a challenge, whatever you want to call it. You've got your conflict, and in the face of that conflict, you have choices. Now, most of us get stuck. Think back to that story arc where conflict is at the start. Most of us never work through that conflict because we don't know which choice to make, right? So think about if you're unhappy at work, whoops, jumped ahead. If you're unhappy at work and you think you might want to leave for something better, but you don't really know if it'll be better, so it's easier just to stay where you are, right? That's a choice you're making based on an uncertainty. Most people would rather stay in a situation that they are unhappy in than make a choice about what could happen next when they don't know the outcome. Why? Because they fear the consequences of that choice. They fear making the wrong decision. Should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Should I end this relationship? Should I stay in this relationship? Should I do the self-work? Should I not? Should I write the book, start the podcast? Whatever it is, we are worried that there's one right choice and one wrong choice. And if we make the wrong one, there will be consequences that'll be worse than where we were before. Everybody following me? So we don't make the choice. And instead, what happens is we stay right there at the start of the story in the state of conflict, and we never move forward. So this is for anyone who feels like they're living the same, they're reading the same page over and over again and nothing ever changes. That's because you're not making a choice. You're not making the choice. Little different from the complacency that we just talked about when you are actively choosing to stay in that state. So how do we make a choice when we don't know what's the right one to make? Well, we took the consequences off the table. I got rid of that word so that we don't have to fear that. What if instead of worrying about making the right or the wrong choice or what happens next, what the consequences will be, what if we just proceeded with another C, a state of curiosity? What might happen if I make this choice? Because every time you make a choice, particularly one that involves a change, not a I'm going to stay where I am, but a choice that involves change, you are opening up a new storyline. You are getting to that rising action that was at the start of our narrative, the narrative structure of a story, that rising action so the story can move on. Otherwise, you just stay back in the state of conflict again and again. So you proceed with a sense of curiosity, you do something, and that allows for the continuation of the story. Now we move on. Now, here's the really cool thing about the continuation of the story. Let's say you do find out that, gee, that wasn't the right choice. I took the job, and I don't like this job at all. Or I regret leaving the job. Well, guess what? You get another choice. I think that we're also like worried about, like, you get one shot at it, and if you screw it up, you never get another shot. Yes, there are impacts to the choices you make, but you're never out of choices. I mean, you get to keep making them. Okay, you took the wrong job. Guess what? You can leave that job. You can get another. You regret leaving your old job. You can try to go back. You can find out what it is you regret about leaving, what it is you miss about that job. You can try to find something that is similar to it. We get to keep choosing. And what you learn from making all these choices is that there's no one choice that's going to ruin the story. It keeps opening up like new portals, new opportunities. And that grows your confidence when you realize you are not going to be subject to or the victim of any one choice that you make. You get to keep choosing. For as long as you're alive, you get to keep choosing. So, don't do anything dangerous, like jump off a bridge that, I tell my kids this all the time. Some of the choices will have consequences. But for the most part, the choices we make, we stay in a state of conflict because it feels safe there, even when we are unhappy. So that's how you can take the formula for reality TV and apply it to your own life, your own choices. Choices that involve some type of change will take you through that narrative story structure, will take you on to the next part of it. Otherwise, we just stay back at the beginning, replaying that conflict over and over again. Does that make sense to everybody?
It really does.
Some of the stuff is heavy. I sometimes feel it when I'm doing this in front of a live room, like, wow, that was really heavy. And I know that people are absorbing it, but it is all opportunistic. It is all like, you have the opportunity every day to change up your story. And sometimes it feels overwhelming because we think of that as being really big changes, like leaving a job, or leaving a relationship or moving across country for a new job. But you can do it in the small little changes you make as well. Change one small thing and see what happens. You've just opened up a new storyline. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you might script your reality. And this was a little bit in the pre-assessment when we were talking about the conflicts. It's phrased a little bit differently, so it might come up in a different way. Think about a conflict you face. Again, feel free to change the verbiage if you want to say challenge or hurdle or even opportunity. In this case, I call it a conflict. Think about a conflict you face. What is a choice you have in the face of that conflict? What is a change you can make? Doesn't matter how small. And then how does the story continue based on that change? I could give you an example of something that I did recently, sort of avoiding one of those holes I always fall in, or we can sort of workshop it right now if anybody wants to kind of bring up something that they are facing right now and what they know their choices are.
I don't know if this is targeted enough, but so I kind of blend together the complacency from earlier with the sort of complicit understanding that, ooh, the guinea pigs are jumping around. Sorry.
That's okay. I didn't realize you had guinea pigs there.
With the knowledge that I have actively made the choice in the past for a variety of reasons to stay where I'm at for a set of circumstances at the time, going, I'm choosing to do this. Like, I've thought about it. I'm doing this now. And then you run up a little while later, you reassess and you're kind of complacent, but you're like, wow, there's so many things going on here, or a different aspect of the job gets dangled in front of me and I take it. And then in some cases I've even been rewarded, so I've had some promotions and things that are like, all right, I made a good choice. But I still come back to the same place that I sort of started and have Groundhog Day done it, which is, it's just, how do I take the time to figure out what I want to do next, not what all the externalities have either just put on a platter or said, somebody has to do this and you're here, whether that's in personal life or work life, but it's like, oh, there's all these things to do and you're doing them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not necessarily, I'm not unhappy, but at the same time, I'm like, enough. Like, I want to author this forward. I don't want to just accept what hits me.
Yep.
And so that's sort of my conflict. So I know I have choices, but I get stuck at the stage of, okay, I know there's certain steps I have to do, but in this case, part of why I'm here, I don't really know what I'm reaching for. I know sort of what I've done. I know things that I maybe like, but it's not like I have a driving passion that says, if only I had the time, I know I would do this. I don't know that. So I'm sort of just stuck in this inevitable, the crazy's going to be there tomorrow. They're still going to want to wire players on Thursday, and I have to figure that out. But, that's not my choice. That's a job I've been asked to do, and I'm doing it. And I'm being paid for it. And I've been part of conversations where people have had to be let go, and they're like, Kristen, are you bringing people back? I'm like, no. And I know I'm lucky in the current environment that I'm working, and, I don't really feel threatened personally, which is great. But that's my conflict choice, and I'm stuck.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like the conflict, and tell me if I'm hearing this correctly, the conflict is that you feel unfulfilled, but you don't know why or what to do about it.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay. Well, correct me. Where have I, like, what's the driving emotion behind that conflict?
The driving emotion is I guess in this stage that a little bit of, at some point you're looking at the grass is always greener, but at this point I'm like, I've lived in this grass for a long time. I know what this grass is, and I'm outgrown it. And, you know, I don't want to necessarily do exactly the same thing in someone else's grass, because that's just being like, oh, I visited your house, it was nice for today. You know, but at the same time, you know, I'm pretty much resigned to the idea that I'm ready, but I just don't know how to get out of my own space and carve out enough me. I guess I'm not really great at the introspection part, like the writing exercises. I got to admit, this is not my forte.
Okay.
I'm much more of the visual technical side than I am the writing side. So like the sit down and write it all out is painful. I always say it's a college class that I took and hated, was script writing. So yeah, so that's kind of my conflict is, you know, it's, I don't know if it's necessarily unfulfilled so much as there's probably a portion of it that is unfulfilled for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's a little frustration and disappointment all woven in there, but then
what are you disappointed about?
Probably that I didn't kick myself out sooner.
Where would you have gone?
I'm not entirely sure. See, again, I don't know where. I just know that, you know, the path doesn't always go straight, and that's fine. But I feel like the path is definitely like paused for a little bit, and then I'm like, I gotta go. And then generally to my thinking of it, experiences that some sort of externality has made me take the choice to say, no, stay here.
Yep.
You know, this will pass, this little thing that's making you stay, and then you'll do it later. And then didn't do it later. So.
Yeah. So I think it's sort of maybe the conflict is you're trying to figure out what's missing for you. There's something about this that just you're you know you're good at it, you know you can do it, you know all the reasons why, as you said, you feel lucky, which again that's now we're laying the guilt on top of the current situation. You should feel lucky because other people are getting laid off, right? So you should keep what you have, and that's the sort of the fear talking of, you know, stay where you are because that's better than not knowing the consequence of making another choice. But I think, and you and I can probably, if the writing exercises are kind of like not bringing out what you'd like to like help, you know, through this process, there might be other ways that there might be other tools I can give you that will feel more comfortable to you.
Okay. I did do them. It was
I'm glad.
Homework assignment that I was like, I did it late, but I completed it.
I think it's good, but again, like there might be other tools we can use. I think what you need to figure out is what's missing.
Okay.
And there might be a series of questions that we can probably talk through instead of writing that just starts with, you know, what would make you happy? And I'm not a big vision board person, but if you are a visual person, I would be curious of like, what are the images in your mind of what makes what Kristen's interested in? Just like start pulling out pictures or going on the internet and clipping, you know, doing some clip art, some pictures of
mood board.
What's that, Maria?
Make a mood board. I'm also visual. For me, it's make a mood board. Like
I would kind of like to do that.
Yeah. And I know that there are people who really say that having that vision board or mood board, whatever you want to call it, can help. But if you're a visual person, I just think, you know, that Kristen, you're looking for the answers, right? And maybe one of the conflict is that you feel like there should be an answer at this point. Like I should know what I want to do.
Yeah.
And maybe the choice you have is that what if you just spent the next 3 months exploring what you like, who you are and what you like, and giving some thought to that and trying a few new things. I realize your time is limited, you know, but getting to know yourself again, because maybe the conflict isn't so much about feeling unfulfilled at work, but not really knowing where you fit into your own story. Okay. And you should, and definitely let's spend a little time outside of this session, and maybe I can give you some other tools that will help you, different questions to ask that gets you to the source of what am I missing here? Where is my heart? And how do I figure out what's next? And then if the company still wants to throw you a bone, hey, we really value you and here's some more money or here's a project, and it feels good to you, if it gives you enough reason to stay, you can choose to do that without feeling complacent. It's also entirely possible that some of what's missing for you isn't going to be found at work. It might be found elsewhere. You know, I think especially in that kind of industry where so many people do move on after a while, the feeling of maybe I shouldn't be here anymore, you know. So I think there's a number of ways we can tackle that. And I'm glad you brought it up. And I'm also glad you brought up the sort of the discomfort of the writing assignments, because there are probably other tools we can use. I think the conflict you face might also just be a not understanding why you're in a state of conflict. You know?
Nothing but easy answers for me. I like it.
No, but the choice you have is to spend some time figuring out what's missing, what it is that, you know. So I think there's some tools that we can do. But thank you for bringing that up. And I think that's a very relatable scenario too. Yeah. So anybody else have something conflict that they want to bring up?
If I may add something to Kristen.
Can I?
Yeah, I think Nisreen's jumping in. Nisreen, just bring your volume up a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So from what I was hearing Kristen say, it sounds like she's not challenged. Is that, you know, not being challenged to me personally, and maybe I'm projecting, but that's one of those areas where when I feel that at work, it's the times where I start thinking, it's like, okay, maybe it's time to move. And then I still find myself or find a new thing to challenge me. And it's a dynamic environment since it's a startup. So there's always that complacency turning into challenge. But I know, like with the coronavirus and everything going on around us, it's really scary for everybody. So I think not being challenged is one of those keys, but then the fear of the unknowns, and that's, I mean, it's really a big unknown for all of us right now, because none of us have lived through anything like this before. It kind of throws us off a little bit.
Yeah. Kristen, do you feel challenged at work?
So it's interesting. In the day-to-day micro, yes, you know, there are challenges that I face, but in the macro, some of the challenges are like, I've already done this twice. I've gone through 2 reorgs in the company, and I've taken on a different role. I was on the lower end the first time, and now I'm on the managing side of this. And so in a day-to-day sense, I do have challenges, and I think that some new opportunities and some of those challenges, I'm pretty much a curious person. So I'm like, ooh, you got a challenge? Like, let me see how I do with that. And then I'm like, why did I say yes? Because now I'm the one scratching my head trying to figure this out. But I think that in the bigger picture, and that's probably where I get stuck again, because you're looking so big, it's hard, and you try to say, well, look small. And then you get into the small, and you can deal with all the little small, but you can't put it back into the big, which is funny, which is what I tell people all the time. Like, that's what I do with my work for others. I'd say this before, but like in work, if you gave me a big project and said, what do we do? Like, I can usually pull it all apart. I can do it out of order. I can put it back together and say, see, here you go. And other people don't have that skill set. Sometimes they're like, why are you doing it in this order? I'm like, because you can't do it linear. And maybe you do got to do it linear, but I can do that. But when I look at myself and what my conflict is and where I'm stuck, I have a much harder time with that. And so I think in work sense, I have been dangled certain carrots, and I've chosen certain things on the path. And then when I get to the end of it, it's like, okay, we're starting to see the same challenges come up, but the people around me are different. So they're new challenges to them that I've seen before. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to instruct you because I've done this. And I'm here to use, they like to say it's the institutional knowledge. Yeah, I have it in this particular niche that I'm in. And that's a good thing, but it starts to just feel like it's not a comfortable skin at times, because you're fighting battles almost because it's brand new to someone else. It's shiny new, and they're like, no, it's going to be great. And you're like, oh my God, I've done this. I know the holes, right? Maybe there's some new ones, but I at least know the existing ones. And they just want to just run straight down the street. And you're like, you know, and it's that pull I have to be like, okay, you know, maybe it's time for me to step aside and go on the other road, to use your good analogy there, to take a different street, because I'm tired of the street that I'm looking at. And, you know, this is sort of the position I'm at, and there's certain choices I can see in front of me where I maybe can't go as far forward as I want if I stay exactly where I'm at. But at the same time, it's going to take more work for me, like dual pathing the existing work, to say, okay, work on yourself in the extra time and pull it all together while this part stays here. And I think that's where I also get caught up, because I can think about the parts and I can be motivated to do them, but then they get put to the side and then they get pulled back out, and you're like, right, what was I doing? Oh yeah, okay. And then I don't want to do the writing, and I'll put it back.
But like I said,
hard for me, and like I said, it's so frustrating to see me. Thank you. It's so frustrating to recognize all the work I can do with other people, and I'm giving them the advice I should internalize and just do it myself. And I'm so busy helping other people, whether it's work related, it's project, it's personnel, or it's even like my family. My iPad won't turn on, you know, Mom, what's going on? And you're like, ugh, you know, and then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, what did I just do for myself? I solved everybody else's problems and I still have my own. So
yep. And for someone who's a people pleaser, as you sort of mentioned, you know, that you are, and you like solving problems, it gets very easy to do that. And then the days all sort of meld together. And I do, and I'm sure Kelly and Rich, who've sort of worked in this area, would probably have ideas on how to sort of get you focused on really answering the question, which is, what do you want? And it's something that we are gonna that we are gonna bring up. And
the part is, it's uncomfortable to sometimes answer these questions, and you know, for me, that feeling of uncomfortable is a sticking point where I'm like, I got a lot of other stuff over here I could do. So let's leave uncomfortable and go to some other place.
Yeah. And we talked about sort of sitting in that discomfort in order to work through the conflict, which might not seem like a conflict, but this idea, then I keep coming back to this idea of so the challenges you're having at work are more like the busyness of it and the overwhelming amount of it. And this new team needs this, and this new person needs this, even though you already know how to do it, so that you feel like you're kind of riding this merry-go-round of, you know, that's where I keep coming back to this word of like fulfillment, of like, what would make you feel
that's
fulfilled?
Probably a better word than, I can't even remember at this point what the first word was, but fulfillment might be.
I think the first word I used was unfulfilled.
Is it? See?
Yeah.
It was.
But it might just be a different way of looking at it again, of like, what might make me happy? And that kind of introspection can be heavy or can be challenging to do. It's also, and I think I mentioned this really in one of the first sessions, your life's work is to figure out your life's work. It might have been on a different webinar. So it is work. But it allows you, and I think, you know, somewhere sort of deep inside you, Kristen, like you're ready for more. You're itching for more. You know you can do this. There's something more for you out there, but it is work to go get it. Having that vision, identifying what it is sort of the first key to getting there. So let's move a little into the future story. So I mention this often, flashbacks go the wrong direction. We use the past as evidence for our future. Sometimes that can be a good thing, but often that can be a bad thing, given our propensity to be more likely to remember negative events than positive ones. So if flashback, everyone knows what a flashback is, right? When you think about a flashback in your own life, what situation pops in your head? My guess is it's not the happiest moment of your life unless I prompt you for it. I tend to remember really like stupid little things, like embarrassing things I did in like 1998. And like they're still in my head, and why I would keep remembering that. Or like Marina's, you know, candy on the coat story. You know, we remember these things and they take us back, but that's the wrong direction. So there's a literary technique that I'd like to introduce you to called the flash forward.
Okay.
An actual thing. Perhaps you've read a book where the author does this. It's used less frequently than the flashback, but a flash forward is a scene that takes the narrative forward in time from the current point of the story. So basically you're seeing what happens to the central character down the road before the author brings you back in time. You're getting a glimpse of the future. This is an exercise I love to do. Kristen, I typically do this as a writing exercise, but you can do it as a verbal exercise or just, for you as a visual person, almost a visual exercise of what do you want? If you were a fortune teller or a future, someone who could see into the future, what do you want to happen? Where are you? If we had the same conversation, if we all gathered here a year from now, 12 months from now, it's 2021, there's a vaccine, the pandemic is over, right? Can we at least say that? Maybe we have a new president. I probably shouldn't get political, but where do you want to be? This is part of like that sort of that vision board, I think. And the answer can't be, I don't know. You got to come up with something. Let's start getting details from it. So creating your flash forward is sort of part of this week's post work that we will, that I'll give you more specific questions for. But I want you to literally, and Kristen, for you, this should be a visual exercise. Find 5 minutes, turn off the lights, sit with the guinea pigs, whatever it is. You can't be disturbed. Tell your kids if they can't figure out the iPad, they're on their own. And spend 5 minutes and just think about, picture this vision of the future. Faye, do this too. You are showing up at work. You are on time. You are energized. What are you doing? Who are you with? Who's in the scene? What is happening? This is your story. Let's start inventing it, at least with the vision. Now, I'm not one of these people who's like, you can manifest your destiny just by thinking about it. There's a lot of, my feed right now is full of this. You can manifest $1 million. You can vibrate your, frequencies, all this stuff. There's people who probably teach this, but I do believe that you cannot create the action points, the plot points to get to that next chapter if you don't know where you're going. So the first part is to start with, where am I? What am I doing? What does this look like? What does it feel like? Get the image in your head. I have this for you guys as a writing exercise for this week. You have my permission to take those prompts and make it a purely visual exercise. I suggest jotting down some notes just so that you have something to refer back to, but you can also, record something into your phone, or you can schedule a 15-minute session with me and talk it through and maybe record that if that would be helpful for you. Literally take yourself on a flash forward 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. Pick a time frame that is meaningful to you. What is happening? Don't let a critical narrator get in your way and say that's never going to happen. Don't go to worst case scenario. Why not make this that triumph over adversity story and pick that happily ever after? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is it fiction? Sure, for now, but why not start there? Create that next chapter. So that's going to be part of your homework assignment. And know that, I like this quote, you can't start the next chapter of your life if you keep rereading the last one. Katie and anybody else that is stuck in a past chapter. And it's time to move the story along. Learn from the last chapter. We read that one already. We don't need to go back and live it again. We know what happens in it. We don't know what happens in the future chapter. What do you want to happen? Kristen, what do you want? Oh, she stepped out for a second. Well, what would you tell someone else who was in your situation? So consider what that future story might involve. And in fact, just for fun, now we titled our current chapters. Let's go ahead and open up that chat and see what's in there.
My next chapter.
Yes. You can title the next chapter anything you want. I mean, it can say, what I did after I won the lottery. I don't care what you title it. This is your story. Come up with the title of your next chapter. I'm going to do mine. It's going to be called, I finally finished the book. There you go. That's my next chapter. What's in yours? It just can't be the same as the last one, except for Marina, because she was in a really good chapter, so she can stay there. Living in the moment without guilt, maybe. But flash forward. Where are you 6 months from now? What's in the next chapter? Call it anything you want. Kelly, free, fabulous, and fun. I love that. You're all about the alliteration tonight, Kelly. Katie, tell me about Embracement Street. We're walking down a different street.
Yeah, I think opening my mind to, new possibilities, and instead of being paralyzed, and embracing the unknown a little bit more and exploring, different avenues.
Yep. Okay. So work on that from the flash forward perspective. What's on that street? Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? How do you feel? Like actually create this neighborhood in your head of what is embracing this new street. Who do you want to see there? And what do you want to do when you get there? So start getting specific with what that looks like. Faye, I'm here. Where are you?
I don't know.
This is your future chapter.
But I want to say I'm here, and I want the subtitle to be I avoided the holes.
Yes. Okay. So again, kind of like, so you and Katie are very much like, you're ready for it. You were ready to walk down this new street. I want you to get detailed as to what it is, where it is you're headed, how you feel when you get there. What are you doing there? Kristen, ready, set, go. Mm-hmm. No, sorry. Go ahead, Faye. I cut you off.
I really appreciated the year early. And I wrote down, no, you said you're on time, and I wrote down I'm early, I'm proactive. What else did I write before? I'm showing up early. I'm turning in work early. I'm proactive in every way. That's as far as I got. Okay. So again, you're judging yourself from a level of success about this is something that's important to you because it's something that you've struggled with in the past. And I want you to consider even more of like, specifically, where are you early? What are you doing? I think I'm a contracts manager. I think I'm working in a legal department of a company. I think that's what I want to continue to do. Okay. But I also want to say that I'm the procrastination. So Kristen, I procrastinated with the homework, and I didn't even get to the plot points. I figured out what my conflicts were. But then I wrote and I thought it was, and I'm going to email it to you. The work you gave us from last week, I wrote something out that was very, I'm going to use it with my therapy session tomorrow. Let me just say that. That's it. Good. But I think that's important too. And it's important to have that place to explore it more, because you don't know what will come up during this process. So I think that's, if any of these prompts were helpful to you, and if any of them don't feel right in the moment, these are tools that you can take with you and refer back to at any point. So important to know that. All right. So Kristen, ready, set, go. So it sounds like, okay, this is the next process. I'd be curious to know the chapter after that. Where'd you go? Where have you gone? Like, let's start thinking about, you are getting ready for this. What's Kristen's next chapter going to include? I want you to think about, like, specifically what it might include. Marina, living in the moment, living off the land. You guys have to see, like, Marina should just have us all over for dinner, like made entirely from her garden, because it's amazing. Rich, talk to me about, is this the title of your next chapter, or is this like one of the plot points within it?
It's one of the plot points. I opened by saying how I wasn't very organized and needed some structure and support, and I've hired a number of personal assistants and researchers and tech people, and I just don't trust the process, so it doesn't work well. So I miss opportunities, and I just have to keep trying and be more trusting. Okay. All right. So when you say that you have to keep trying and doing this, think about, what are the actual plot points to get to that point of trust? What is it that you actually need to be doing? And other than, like, can we get more specific on what it means to try? What are the choices you can make so that you can see what happens from making those choices? Personal assistants and researchers are pretty intimate to your experience, and I haven't found the right ones. and I like harmony, and I'm really independent. So sometimes I feel like I'd rather do it myself than have them come to the office and spend the morning with me to get information, which doesn't help them. It's not fair to them, and it's not very productive.
Okay. All right. So what are some of the choices you have with that challenging situation?
Well, it's to find the right chemistry and or clean off the desk a little bit and have fewer projects, create fewer distractions so I can focus and be organized myself at a better level.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if Kelly's on right now. I know her video's off, but I wonder, because she works with a lot of teaching assistants too, whether she might have some thoughts on that relationship as well. But it sounds like taking the time to get it to work in the way that you want it to function will ultimately make everything easier on the back end. It's just that initial investment of making it work.
That's fair.
Yeah. Nisreen, get this party started. What's this party? Where are we going? Who's at the party? What are we doing? What kind of a party scenario do we have here?
I don't know. Music is on my mind today. So I actually, I think the reason is I've been building up for a very big exam that I have tomorrow for my dancing. So I get to get my bronze level in leading and following in like 9-ish different dances.
Wow.
And it's a long exam. So that's why it's like all the dance themes today. So that's where I actually, so it's the Pink song. If anyone remembers, let's get this party started.
Yeah, sure.
So this is one of my my pumping up songs where I want to get motivated and get things done. But it's basically owning myself, owning my accomplishments and my space and what I've created so far, and finding my leadership. Well, not exactly finding my leadership style, but it's like I think I have a leadership style, but I'm hesitant about it. And I vibrate between mentoring and managing, and I'm neither one of these anymore. Like used to be in college and teach and mentor grad students, and now I'm in a corporate environment and I'm a VP, and it's just confusing where I want to be, and I don't like managing. And I'm away from mentoring, and I want a space in between, but there's not a defined way of setting that up. Like there's not a job description that puts something like that. And I think it's creating that space where I'm engaged and I'm providing that institutional knowledge and creativity and problem solving and moving projects forward. But at the same time, it's not on anyone's specific description, but it's more of a creative space.
Yeah. It sounds to me too, like, I mean, this whole party you're creating is, you're ready to enjoy yourself more, and that you recognize where at work, the things that you do enjoy, and that you're not doing enough of them. And I wonder how much of that can you create on your own and say, here's the value that I see in doing this, and the value that I bring, knowing it brings value to you too. And because you're one of the founders of this company, right?
Yeah.
What is the opportunity there to say, this is the next step for me, is to do this and just present it as if here's the party, I'm hosting it, like it's done. I'm just doing it.
I'm gonna go back to the potholes I create for myself and the overcommitment. So I kind of like, I've even changed my title recently to be like special, strategic projects and special operations. So like it's that niche market there. So I could do whatever I want to do. The problem is when my teams, start falling behind, or there's a bigger problem and I'm helping them, or someone pulls me in to help with a project, then I kind of overcommit myself and I'm not enjoying those other projects, on the horizon, or like planning for next year or something to, play around with potential and engaging with our customers and users. And I get myself back on the same road.
Yeah. And it sounds a little bit like what Kristen's struggling with that there's enough busyness to do and people need help. And so you do all this stuff, and yet you get no closer to putting yourself at the top of the list. And what do I want and what will make me happy? Little slightly different situation, but it sounds a little reminiscent. Bobby, I accidentally Did I skip you? View from the top. Where are you? What's the view? Where, you know, can you be a little more specific? It's a great title for the next chapter. Do you have an idea as to what this looks like?
It was general on purpose because I don't. But you know, so it was me visualizing that different street, that, you know, choices have consequences, even if some of them are positive, that the view will be different. And so that's one thing I can look forward to is hopefully I make the choices that improve the situations, and I can sit back and look at a new view and be energized by that.
Okay.
But it's purposely general, and I've got to go into it and think more about what the plot points are.
Yeah, and you do. And so one of the things that I do a lot of pushing for, and Kelly knows this, is the details of the story, because the details of the story are what make it specific, what make it stand out, what make it unique to you. So having a general title is good, but anytime someone says to me, you know, like, oh, my title is success. Okay, what does success look like to you? And then once we know what that looks like, then we can start putting the plot points together. For everyone who sort of title it like, I'm ready to move on, ready, set, go, there's a new street I'm going to embrace. Your plot points are just what you need to do to get to that street and to get to that place. And some of that is the discomfort of working through this time of introspection. We have many distractions. There's many other choices we could make. There's many things calling for our attention. If you want a different view, you want a different storyline, you have to make the choices to institute some changes. And we'll do that in just the plot points. So your next plot points might just be figuring out what success looks like. Honestly, you guys, it comes down to two really easy questions. The first is, what do you want? What do you want? And if you haven't asked yourself that question in a while, the first thing might be, well, I don't know. So, okay, let's start small, but really it starts there. What do you want? And then how are you going to get it? You know, that's sort of the tough follow-up, even if you do know what you want. But that's what these exercises are designed to do. Think about your next chapter. Your story is crafted one page at a time. What happens next? Don't wait for someone else to tell you that. Decide where you want to go and decide what the next step is. Some other questions to consider. How do you want to be known? How will you make that happen? And then what are the holes we can identify in advance so we can try to avoid them? So my chapter was going to be, I finally finished the book. Anyone who knows me, I've been working on several books for several years now, because every time I get a new idea, I start a new one, and therefore nothing is completed. How do I want to be known? I want to be known as a published author. How will I make that happen? Plot points of actually sitting down and doing the writing, and the holes to avoid are the procrastination and the self-doubt, and maybe having an accountability partner. So whatever it is that you're working towards, and we can come up with even more questions. These are some of the ones that to start thinking about. Now, your homework assignment, more writing, but you can do this as a visual exercise. This is for you guys. I like writing things down because you can look back at it in a year and see, like, writing down sort of makes it more real. They say with goal setting, it's important to write things down, but it's up to you. You might find that when you do it more often, you work through the discomfort. We are no longer starting at the exposition at the beginning of the story from that narrative arc. Remember, we started with the exposition and the backstory. We are going to start at the end of the story with the resolution, the happily ever after. Everybody has that that narrative arc from the printout from the pre-assessment, so you can look at that. What is the optimal outcome? If all things worked out exactly as you wanted them to, like, let's not plan for a plan B for when things go wrong. Let's plan for the A+ plan. And I had a blog post about this a couple of years back that I might forward to you with this week's follow-up work. What is the optimal outcome? Let's start at the end. If this thing went about as well as it could have gone, what does that look like? So Rich, you've got the research assistants on board and the assistants, and everybody's gelling. Nisreen, you've proposed to the company, I'm going to take on this new role. It involves mentorship and things that fulfill me. Katie, you are going to decide what is in your next chapter, that you're ready to move on from who you were to who you're going to be. Faye, you're going to figure out this procrastination and why we're sort of self-sabotaging our best efforts. You know, Kristen, you're going to figure out what is it I truly want and get used to the discomfort of taking the time to ask yourself that. Bobby, deciding, do we want to stay where we are based on what's good about it? Or if there's a new view from the top, where am I? What am I doing? I'm just throwing stuff out there real quick, guys, but you start at the optimal outcome. And here are some questions. So this is based on the 5 W's and the 1 H. We're putting them in the future story. And I'll ask them this way. This is the slide I'm going to send you, so you don't need to write it down. These are prompts. You can write them down. You can sit and visualize them. Who do you want to be? And that's a really general question, but I ask you to get specific with it. So it can be something like, I just want to be a happy person. Okay, so what does that mean to you? What would make you happy? What does a happy person do? What does a happy person look like, feel like? Or it could be specific. I want to be a vice president at this company. Who do you want to be? You can answer that any number of ways. There are no right or wrong answers. What does that question bring up for you? What do you want to happen? What happens next? This is your story. Well, I figure out what I want to do. Okay, what is that? See, if you work one-on-one with me, we keep asking the questions over and over again until you either get so frustrated, you know, or you come up with the answers because we dig in and we get into the specifics. What is the story you'd like to tell? Think about your future self telling the story to, you know, of the story of your life. What's the one you'd like to tell? Now let's get into some specifics. When does this happen? When is the time frame for this? Where does this happen? What is the location? This will help you sort of put the visual to it. Why is this important to you? Let's get at some of the emotion behind it. And then, of course, this one at the bottom is the big one. How will you make it happen? But we go back to the plot points. So again, these are just some of the prompts. It's sort of a 2-part exercise. It's that flash forward, that visualization, and then let's get specific about the details. Does anybody have any questions about that as the follow-up assignment and the plot points you'll need to create to change the story? Now, I'm keeping this future focused. I know for some of you, when you joined this course, it was because you wanted to be better able to tell your story, meaning where you've been in the past. These questions work for that as well. But if you need a little more guidance, if tonight's session isn't helping you think about your past plot and how to speak about your story, feel free to hit me up and I can rephrase these in a way that I think will be helpful to you. Again, this is sort of future focus so that for next week when we talk about, and I'll go through what we're going to do next week, we at least have an image of what we're working towards. And then I'll share with you, I really like this quote, you guys, from Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Kelly, you know this one. I see you nodding. This is it, you guys. This is your story. You get to decide the role you want to play. This is where you get out of your own head and into your life with the plot points to make it happen. You don't just walk down busy street and fall into the hole of like having to do everyone else's project first and we'll figure it out down the road. This is it. This is your opportunity. Any questions? All right, so next week is our last group session. It's gonna be weird for me on Tuesday nights. I'm gonna miss you guys. We might have to do some sort of a follow-up down the road. But this is what we're gonna do for next week. We are going to take some of what we've done in the past 3 weeks, but we're gonna move it forward into goal setting, action planning, accountability, managing distractions, meaning things that can go wrong in this process, and what happily ever after looks like for you, but how you're going to get there. So it's basically taking the plot points and moving them forward with actionable steps. If you feel like anything over the past 3 weeks, like you're a little stuck on or like just not quite sure, feel free to hit me up during the week. And keep in mind that everything we do and the tools that I'm giving you, you can refer back to. I don't think anyone's going to come out of the month with the exact plan, but you're going to come out with the start of a plan and tools to continue to refine it. Anybody have any questions? Thoughts, comments? Second glasses of wine.
Well, I don't know if you saw, I popped in the chat, legal operations specialist just came into my head.
As a title of a role you're looking forward to.
And that also that when I say contracts manager, it's too limiting for me. I don't want to just do contracts. I want to do full technology kind of things as well.
Excellent. So that's a good vision and something to then work towards.
Yeah, I got that clarity out of this
Very
session
good.
And the homework.
Very good. And so keep notes on that. It's almost like, and Kristen, this would be for you as well, just thinking about like, when you think about what do I want to do, what do I want to work on, to be able to be like, yeah, it's not just this, and then to be specific with it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because then, Faye, you can take that image and the tools you have at your disposal and all the great work that you've done so far, and then you can make sure when you're interviewing that comes out in the interviews, that it's on your resume. It's part of your brand. That's your story. Good. So I'm glad that came up for you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is it heavy in here tonight? It's heavy, right? Is it heavy stuff? I always thought the narrative point of view stuff was heavy.
You gotta have your Oprah moment at the end, and then say, and now here's the cookies. Like, and then you make the choice to eat the cookie, or do you say, no, I learned that I can't eat the cookie.
I ate all the cookies, so I can't even show you the cookies. And like the first one was really good, you guys. The rest of them were so not worth it. But
in there.
I fall in that hole. Don't even get me started about Wheat Thins too. I fall in that hole every time. No, I thought you were going to say that the Oprah moment is, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a next chapter, and you get a next chapter, and you get to decide what happens in it. But you do. You kind of do. So I hope that even though some of this might feel heavy, I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel like you are owning the story. I hope you know that you don't have to have it all figured out today, but that the one thing you always have available to you is our choices. So thank you for being here tonight. Keep in mind, I am here for you over the course of the week. I will put together a great session for next Tuesday night. I will look forward to seeing you then, but don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime if you need to. All right. Wishing you all a great week ahead. Thank you so much.
Valerie, thank you. It's great.
All right. Take care, everybody.